Ki au nei te tuatai, wehi ana ki te atua, nāna te timatango ngā mea katoa. Me ki pē ki tēnei o ngā aitanga maha o whātua, ki tēnā o ngā wai marino o te waitemata, whiri no ki tēnā o matāho, o rangi toto. Kia rātou ngā kānoki hou ki tēnei tūmomo mahi te whakapainga o te arateke ki ngā mōheotanga māramatanga o ngā taiao katoa o te motu. Nei rā. Taku rangatira, mo te manaaki tangararo i te tuanui o tēnei whare. Tēnā koe, me koutou katoa konei. Kami. We're in Auckland, so I better acknowledge those fellas. And all of those that are watching as new faces coming into this knowledge base and the role that they're going to take over the next several years, if not decades. In terms of providing a platform for the well-being of generations to come, the way we've been looking at it, as you know, is that although my background's in epidemiology, biostatistics as a department for Auckland University, and well-being in general, and particularly well-being for First Nations, the way that we're going to reach that is through our connection to the outdoors. So outdoor instructors are going to be pivotal in saving not only people but the planet. So there's a lot bigger role that they have to play in the next generations to come, because we can't change well-being without them, but we also can't educate people about the importance of environmental knowledge without them. So we need them as our conduit to places that have been used and abused and have had so many learning opportunities and contributions to make. So I support you 100% on that one, that it's not what we can take, it's what we can give. And through that we honour environments, and environments teach us a whole range of things that contribute in so many different spaces. You might even say that when you're going out and you're trying to teach your kayak strokes and different techniques, that if the weather's bad, maybe that was a good day, because you got the attention of so many different environmental effects that as a non-siloed learning opportunity, there was more in why you shouldn't go and to learn from them why you should. So I like those opportunities, and nor do I ever refer to them as risk. I see them as knowledge.
Yeah, I kind of think that the industry at the moment needs to flip itself on its head, because when in the past people have kind of thought about, what are the hazards, what are the risks, and we have all these. In the past, we've had all these RAMS forms and, risk management plans and those sorts of things. But I'm not sure that we're actually looking at it from the right direction, from the right perspective.
I'd agree with you 100% there too. One of the things we've been looking at and teaching is 4 stages of knowledge across a year, so that we take a tirohanga for the coming year on what suggestions the environment's going to provide information on from stars. Then we'll look at a seasonal indicator for what's going to occur. Then we'll move into our monthly rotation on which phase of the moon we're in and what that's going to deliver across what are generally like 2-week rotations. And then following that, we look at weather patterns, birds, trees, insects and fish for 3-day estimates on what signs are being provided by the environment. And in fact, risk isn't a word that Māori have used in a pre-European context and very rarely talk about today. It's more about understanding the environmental indicators and choosing to or not to acknowledge those.
Yeah, if you don't acknowledge it.
Yeah, that's up to you.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And whatever occurs is up to you.
Yeah.
So you were told. And sometimes I see fellas doing their karakia and they think, we're just asking for the right to go. And I said, karakia is not an asking for a right, because these are your relations. You're related to those trees, you're related to those rocks. So you're not asking permission, you're ringing them up and saying, we're thinking about coming in. And you'll be able to tell by the tone on the phone call whether today's your day or not. It's not that hard.
Well, no, it's not. But I think a lot of people, more in the Western world, have this separation view that they're not connected to nature.
Yeah, no, that's true.
you know.
Sure.
And that's actually my beef, is that people need to get their heads around, in my view, that they're all part of the whole gig. And so everything, it's amazing. It's kind of unfortunate today because people get in their cars, they wake up and they're in their homes and they put their lattes on and they have their little cereal, then they hop in their cars and they drive in their cars to work, and then they go to a building and they sit in the building all day, and then they just reverse the whole thing. And so there's a real loss of connection to nature even through that.
Yeah. Someone was saying to me the other day that people used to come in from the field or from the bush or from whatever for a rest.
Yeah.
Now they go out at lunchtime to try and get a connection.
Yeah, how dumb is that?
Yeah. It seems a little bit odd.
But the opportunity here is to educate and open people's eyes to not get caught down that rabbit hole. And there are, I think, a lot of people down that rabbit hole, but our responsibility is to, on the front line, is to help people not go down that rabbit hole.
No, I agree. There's multiple ways of knowing.
Yeah.
And for the time being, I would suggest that with a tohutaka or environmental sign reading process, that they'll exist in parallel with RAMs and SAPS forms for the time being, because of the risk that boards and trusts have around culpability and an obligation to a coroner, which forces them into corners of thinking that they have to cover all of these things, whereas we do the same things. But our obligation isn't to people, it's to what the environment suggests to us were indicators and whether to go or not. And so often what we see is RAMS forms that are photocopied, but nobody knows what they actually mean.
Well, they never read. They don't. I think that they might even glance over reading them, but they're only reading the words, aren't they?
Yeah.
Because they got told they have.
Yeah. So for the next short foreseeable future, we'll play the game, but more Māori schools we're convincing to come over to what was a pre-European model of understanding what signs were provided and how to read and interpret those as a lifelong learning process that doesn't require a RAMS form to do that, and that can be taught from the moment they arrive to the moment they leave school from year 0 right through. And they carry on with it for the rest of their life, and they just keep adding to that body of knowledge.
I want to come back to you. You mentioned about outdoor education and people who are teaching outdoors to be on the front line and to be making a difference, and this is where the change is going to happen. Can you unpack that a little bit? What do you mean?
Because of my background in population health and had struggling to get any change, we realised that we can't keep repeating the same thing and expect anything to change. So we had to look at different models of that. And ironically, we already had our own models of how to engage that were consistent on our, or consistent with, how well we knew our environment. And that you got well-being as an incidental outcome of the pursuit of knowledge from the environment. And so when you pursue those things, all the other things fall out of your ability to sustain your genetic line through understanding what environment's telling you. So if you like, there's, from a Māori perspective, there's 3 really clear domains of stars, water and land that we learn from. All of our atua or environmental representatives fall out of that. Below that, we show a connection to them. And I think what you're going to see over the next 5 years in Māori communities, and presumably for others, is that where there's been national pan-nation or pan-Māori initiatives, those are starting to fail, and we're going to see a drop down into iwi-centred programs. And in another probably 3 years, we're going to see that drop into hapu-centred versions.
Oh, wow.
So we no longer accept the idea that these things apply to Māori.
Right.
And why that's happening is because we're environmentally centred. And so those people from the coast have no interest in what you're trying to tell them about how things work on a lake or in a river. They want to know what the ocean does.
Yeah, because they live there.
Well, there's a contextual relevance for why they would learn it.
Yeah.
So there's your recruitment agent, and the sustainability comes through providing more information about the ocean that builds on what they already know. And if you can show that connection and the context, they're yours for life. So that's why we're moving from the whole country down into probably a 50k radius, and in the next 3 years, probably a 10k radius, and we teach the things from that area specifically to that group as a reflection of what they can improve around their well-being, their career aspirations, their education, everything.
Yeah, so then there's a real incentive to be able to want to learn that stuff.
Yeah, I guess so. So I think if we have those three domains at the top, we show a connection.
Yeah.
The other thing we're doing with deliberate intention is teaching them what we want them to know from that environment.
Right.
So we don't leave that to chance. And we've seen that happen in a number of institutes where sport institutes, military institutes, whichever kind of institute, they set up and they provide opportunities, but we think opportunities are a little bit too vague for us. We tell them what we want them to know.
Yeah.
So
then you're giving them direction.
Yeah. So we take them into the water and we said, this is what we want you to know from a wave trying to smash you. There's a few other things you need to know about that. So we teach them that part, and below that we're looking at what modalities to deliver it through. And I think this is probably where a lot of organisations start from is, well, why don't we do sea kite? Why don't we do mountain? Without any upper level rationale for why they would do it. And for Māori, and I suspect for mainstream, if you don't provide a rationale for why, that has nothing to do with physical activity, nutrition or health, it's destined to fail.
Yeah.
So we have to pursue high level knowledge for why we would do that. So the modality in the past has been central, and we've pushed it to the side and said, not only can we choose anything, because prior to this it was waka, kapahaka and maurako, and we've said, you can skateboard for all I care, but we can deliver concepts through that to you about why to use that. And then the last phase, and this has probably only been the last 6 or 7 years, we've been pushing this space is timing for when we would teach you a particular topic, which means that if we're in an outdoor environment and we're trying to teach you new content or a new skill, we'll choose to do that on an incoming tide, which is the intent from the environment to provide new knowledge. But if it's an outgoing tide, we can't teach you new things on that. Especially if it's a coastal group that we're working with, because they're used to new things arriving and then old things being cleared away. So you match what environment gives for you as a paradigm for studying those things.
Yeah, and so the environment's driving the education and learning.
Totally. One of the things we had a couple of rugby teams that was pretty left field, and they're asking us about training from the environment. I said, well, choose a beach that's going to be steeper or less steep, depending on how long you want your interval to be, based on the speed of the wave. And I said, when the wave crashes, start your interval sprint. When it crashes again, finish it. If you choose a steep beach, it'll be a short interval. But if you choose a flat beach, it'll be a long interval.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you choose gravel instead of sand, you have to change the way you run on it.
Yes.
And then if we're looking at the sound, it might be that you have to be really quiet on those rocks, which means that you have to use the sound of the wave to cover your movements, which means you'll run on your calves more.
Nice.
So you get a different physiological return from what environment provides for you about how to change the way you engage. Piece of piss when you hear it, eh?
Well, it is, but people don't think of it that way.
Well, we used to.
Yeah, but I think we've got a real culture where we've got a population that's just still, unfortunately, still self-centered. And they're looking at it from, what's the first thing that people tend to think of when they wake up? That's usually themselves. But then, wouldn't it be great that everybody thought when they woke up, thought about almost the first thing is something about what's happening with the environment around outside. And why is the tui the first bird I might be hearing in the morning? And what's the koramaka doing, or why is the kiraru going through and looking pretty drunk? What's going on?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. We had a group that built a new gym, and I says, I'm not sure about the pursuit of health through a concrete room lifting discus steel, but okay. And then they said, well, this is where we meet. And I said, I get that. And I said, I get it for rehab of particular muscle groups. And I said to them, so if we go through all those structures of what it connects to, and we get to the one that says, when would you do this? What time do you start? And they said, 6. I said, okay, why 6? And they said, well, the other gym starts at 6. I says, okay. Well, I looked out the back window there, and you've got pukeko. Pākura is the old name for those ones in the older stuff.
Rowdy birds.
Yeah, well, you see them talking about pākura more than you do pukeko. But what pākura does is it tells you half an hour before it's going to be light. So there's your indicator, and that'll change across the year. So the indicator for that gym that's next to that wetland area should be based on when they first hear the pākura call, get out of bed. They're environmental indicators, and they hadn't thought of that. So that was a surprise to me.
Yeah.
Anyway, none of my business. I don't live there.
Well, the birds do. So how on the big picture, like I know we can only do what we can influence, right, within our scopes, right? The fact that you're here and the fact that people might look at this, that's influencing those people, right? So how this seems like a big thing to try and change.
Well, no.
How would you do that?
You start.
Yes.
Quite often what happens with fellas that talk to me, they say, well, gee, you know about all these different environmental effects and different atua and so on. I said, well, I didn't, but I started, and now I do.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I said, I've been in the outdoors training people for 35 years now, but I wouldn't have thought that I would end up in the position I am now, but just learnt things incidentally, subconsciously, sometimes with intent, and you gather all that together, but you begin. And it's a journey that starts when you decide for it to start. And quite a lot of it I was fairly, it was just a coincidence really that I am what I am, that I grew up in alpine areas,
Right.
Which was really odd for Māori, and then I went through a tertiary system, and then I lived in a number of places overseas that challenged that, then back to a really small Māori community, and all of those culminated into the perfect storm of someone that challenged and questioned a lot of the mainstream processes. So it was just coincidence really, and all of it was spurned on by or prompted by environment really. So I got kicked out of school when I was 15 and I went straight into Milford Sound guiding.
Perfect.
So I was in the bush and I could tell when the weather was going to change because the colour of the water would change.
Yeah.
And long before it would arrive. And southerlies in Milford are dangerous if you don't know what you're up to.
Yeah.
But people would ask me, how do you know? I said, I don't know. But when I looked at it, I knew lots of things that I didn't know I knew. Yeah,
so you kind of, you took your intuitive learning into something that you could articulate.
Yeah, I think so. I think this is where it's been useful, is that for a lot of my colleagues, bros, breathers, they work alongside some things we're doing because I can verbalise for them what they feel.
Yeah, right.
But that's taken 35 years to get to the point of being able to explain this environmental effect that you're seeing can be described from a Ngai Māori perspective as this. And that's taken some time to get to that point.
It has taken some time, but then through your work, then you're actually accelerating that for other people in some ways.
Yeah, well, I think so. But I'm half Irish too, and I also believe in the idea that this can't be maintained or promoted with Māori alone.
Yeah.
It's going to require non-Māori to believe and support in the things that we as Māori believe in, so that the whole country can move forward, because
I agree.
Ultimately what's good for us is good for all New Zealanders to know those things that make Aotearoa so unique. It's a very, very young country when you start looking around.
Oh, really young.
Yeah.
Totally. But the great thing is also, the good thing and bad thing about globalisation is that the travel is that those people, even if they travel over internationally, they're taking that message. If they've got the message, they're taking it somewhere else, which I think's really good. I mean, there's lots of other places around the world that, other cultures like, Canada and all those things that, they've got some really good perspectives on some stuff. But then if we can kind of share that knowledge, ultimately we want, like the whole world's population to kind of think of it this way, won't it?
Well, there's an effect that is through the rise and fall of a number of cultures over the millenniums.
Yeah.
And that we've moved through a number of those phases, and some would argue that we're coming to the end of neoliberal capitalism and consumerism, where large groups, large populations are asking there has to be some other way, because we can't sustain this effort of every single person having every single thing.
Yeah.
Because the planet can't handle it. No. And they're looking to Indigenous leadership for that. And they're saying, well, how have you guys managed to survive despite all the shit we've done to try and kill you? And
take all your land.
So why are you still here? And I think within that there's some great learning opportunities for both. And having said that, I think probably the barrier to making changes isn't necessarily that non-Māori don't want to learn. It's that Māori and other indigenous groups don't want to share. And that's not surprising because of the damage that's been caused. They're reluctant to engage because each time they come in, they get their head cut off, and they're like, why would we? So not only am I half Irish, I don't know, I've got all those other interests, but I understand the need for support on a larger scale to have some of these concepts realised, actualised by a number of different populations so that we might actually save this planet. And those may come from indigenous populations, but I think the translators for that are outdoor instructors. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely a good conduit.
They're the ones that recognise and understand environmental effect and can verbalise that for their counterparts, which is other non-Māori often.
And in many ways, it's their moral responsibility in some ways. If they take on that profession, would you say that it's part of their job?
Yes and no. How I not rephrase it, it's not for me to do that, but one of the things we say to our trainees that we're teaching Māori environmental science is that your obligation isn't to people, it's not to your grandparents, great-grandparents. It goes much further back than that, to your obligation to an environment that caused you to challenge the physiological, psychological and spiritual attributes that you have presently, and to grow those.
Yeah, right.
And if they're extended and flexed and moved and handed on in a better condition, then you were the right one to select.
Yeah.
But if they're not, then that line ends.
Yeah, right.
And through one of two choices, really, either we had to become immortal or we had to provide means to convey an idea.
Yeah.
And that's where Indigenous people supersede or are superior in some ways, is that the complexity and richness of their stories about the environment engage people.
Yeah.
And they bring them in.
You can't beat a good story.
No, and it sustains effort.
Yeah.
Because people will see them as theirs, and because they love the way that it explains their very essence. And it's funny how many people want to know why they are the way they are. And I said, well, it might not be an actual term, but it's envirophysiology. The environment will choose those attributes that you need to survive there. Ignore those at your peril. So you're very much the outcome of what an environment intends you to be. So then why would everything else become about you when it's the environment that made you?
I love that. I want to frame that. That's awesome. Yeah.
Well, it's not mine.
Ka pai.
But you know what I'm saying?
No, and you have a very interesting perspective, which I really love, is about the sharing of knowledge.
Well, I'm not very well liked.
I like you.
Well, maybe you don't know me well enough.
Don't know you enough.
Well, I come off a line of disruptors. And the most well-known is Ihirangi Heke, and the Institute hated him, and the Institute don't like me either, because I'm
not... They want to hang on to things.
Well, I'm not institutionalised, so I speak my mind, and often I punish institutes for wrongs in the past. So I'm not welcome in a lot of places, which I don't mind. I don't have no obligations to institutes or to people, but I do to environmental knowledge, and I'll protect that.
Yeah.
And sometimes people get in the road of that and get run down. So
be it.
So be it. So I'm humbled that people would ask my opinion. It's an odd one to me. I'm happy to have wānanga discussions with anybody about what the future of our environment might look like, how we can create education pathways for our kids, how we can improve our wellness, how we can improve our career aspirations, all of those things. The solutions lie in the environment.
They do.
And sometimes you need a translator, and that's outdoor instructors.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It just keeps coming back to them.
Yeah, for sure.
It took me a little while to figure it out, but...
Ka pai to that. Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much. We're kind of, we'll wrap that up there. Do you want to finish your kōrero already?
Well, if I had to make a suggestion to these fellas that are listening, there's a couple of pathways to begin your journey down towards becoming an instructor, perhaps, that begin with preparing yourself for the arrival of knowledge. We had a number of processes in the past in pre-European Māori society that were about purification. And some of those were to be on mountains, in the water, or being exposed to the wind to be prepared psychologically, spiritually and physically for the arrival of new knowledge. For some of those, it's those people intending to come into here, it's not so much about the physicality, but the preparing of your mind to know that there's a positive future ahead if you choose to engage.
Yeah.
So it's not just about, you know, being on a mountain physically, it's sometimes just having the wind in your face. So we're interested in how you're going to prepare yourself. And then we look at the triangulation of information about where we can find all these things and what that looks like, testing some of those. And then the final phase really is looking for what the spark is, what we call the kiko, the spark that causes a connection between you and an environment, recognizing that, and then fostering that connection. Because one of the things that always used to make me laugh about you was the way you are in a kayak, that you love it, and you can see you spark up as soon as you're in a boat. And so what I always found interesting about that was it wasn't so much the ocean or a river, and it wasn't so much the kayak, and it wasn't so much you, but it was when all three were brought together. That there was energy that flowed back and forwards between all three that caused something exciting to come from it that other people wanted a part of. So those three phases are interesting to me, and hopefully interesting to these fellas here, about how you end up in that place.
Yeah.
O tira, kia rātou ngā mate maha mai o te iku o te ika, ki te wharakaure ki te waipuna mo hoki, moi rā. Kia koe hoa mo te kaha, me te tautoko ki tēnei o tātou take, kaupapa, mōhotanga, nei rā te mihi. Kia rātou keroto i tēnei whare, tēnā koutou katoa, kia ora mai tātou. Too much.
Kia ora. Never enough. It's awesome.
Crack up.
Thanks, bro.
Too much.
Yeah.